Cory Booker sexual assault accuser posts update. We now might know why he's so theatrical. Senator Cory Booker, aka Spartacus, has been accused of sexual assault, and it's not from who you'd think. If the allegations are true, it might explain why he's so theatrical on the Senate floor. Yep, you guessed it, Booker has been accused of assault by a gay man. I'm sure the Democrats will call for an immediate investigation by the FBI. Oh wait, they only do that to Republicans. The Gateway Pundit is reporting. An anonymous gay male stepped forward today and released a shocking description on how he was sexually assaulted by Senator Cory Booker back in 2014. The man claims Booker came to his workplace to speak, met him as he was coming out of the men's room, and then pulled him back into the restroom and sexually assaulted him. The young man is a gay man and Democrat. The man tells a very detailed analysis on what took place at his work. The man says he reached out to Ronan Farrow, but the Me Too reporter did not show much interest in his story. The Gateway Pundit reached out to his attorney Harmeet Dillon, who told us the man is considering the situation and has no further comment at this time. The accuser posted an update following his initial statement. The man says he suspects his accusations will be ignored because he is a man and not a woman. He also believes it may be too late for him to call for an investigation. Maybe the FBI should get involved and open up an investigation on the New Jersey senator? What's fair is fair, right? I feel the need to follow up on some of the responses I have received thus far. 1. For those of you who take issue with my Twitter handle, Mark Felt was Associate Director of the FBI from 1972–73. He secretly fed information to Woodward and Bernstein, which ultimately led to President Nixon's resignation over the Watergate scandal. For doing this, he was affectionately nicknamed Deep Throat by the media. I would have thought everyone would have understood the reference. Apparently, that was a poor assumption on my part. I don't blame anyone for having no sense of history. But don't blame me because you're ignorant of history. And your brain defaults to porno references, too. For those of you calling for an investigation, that was the first thing Harmeet and I discussed. Unfortunately, both the criminal and civil statutes of limitation in my state have expired. With regards to the FBI, they have no jurisdiction. 3. For those of you who take issue with my not reporting the incident. Immediately, well, that was a judgment call. 3 years prior, I reported my employer and was promptly fired. What do you think would have happened if I had reported a sitting U.S. senator? I had to take a pragmatic approach. Maybe that was a mistake. I am only human. But I didn't wait decades. 4. It seems not everyone read my entire statement. I am not a woman. I am a man. So I am not holding my breath in thinking that this will be anything but largely ignored on the left. I also just want to thank everyone for their kindness. There has been a flood of overwhelmingly supportive feedback, which I did not expect. I had no idea people en masse could so gracious. But then again, it's only Saturday. Cory Booker sexually assaulted me, and why it won't matter to the Me Too movement. Yes, you read that right. The man who would be the modern incarnation of the Thracian gladiator turned rebellion leader, once tried to aggressively force me to give him a blowy in my then workplace restroom. That may be a hard pill to swallow, given Mr. Booker's distinguished political pedigree as a champion of liberal populist issues and marginalized communities. But despite his whimsical penchant for theatrical displays of impassioned defiance, he's just another asshole. Now I know what you might be thinking if you're a Booker backer. You're thinking that I'm full of shit. But before you jump to that conclusion, let me tell you a little about myself. If we were to travel just 4 years back in time, you and I would find solidarity on the subject of Cory Booker. As a matter of fact, he was a hero of mine. I was and still am, a liberal in principle with a record of voting exclusively for Democrats since I was 18, with the exception of the 2016 election cycle. But it was in the summer of 2014, when Senator Booker visited my workplace, that my political worldview began to shift. I had the chance to meet and speak with him at some length in an informal group setting. I made it quite clear that I was a great admirer of his, especially with regard to his record of being an advocate of the LGBT community. I left the meeting prior to the rest of the group, just as everyone was finishing up, and went to use the restroom. It was there that Booker and I bumped into each other again for what would prove to be a much less pleasant interaction. Here is a description of the incident as I described it to a lawyer. I stopped to use one of the building's single-occupancy restrooms. Upon washing my hands prior to leaving, I heard knocking on the door. When it comes to these restrooms, it is customary to knock first in case someone is using it, even though there is an inner lock. When I opened the door, Mr. Booker was there. He smiled and very gregariously said hey. We engaged in some brief idle chit-chat in the entryway and then he asked me to speak in private. What happened next happened so fast that it was hard for me to comprehend what was going on. It was one of those surreal moments where what was happening was such a deviation and such a perversion of one's natural daily routine that I hardly knew how to react. He pulled me into the restroom, albeit not too forcefully, and slowly pushed me against the restroom wall. He said that being a hero was a serious turn-on. He continued, "The Senate appreciates fine citizens like you. Especially this senator." He then put his left hand on my groin, over my jeans, and began to rub. I seem to remember saying something like, "What is happening?" It was a bit like having vertigo. He then used his other hand to grab my left hand with his right and pulled it over to touch him. At the same time, he disengaged from rubbing me and used his left hand to push me to my knees from my shoulder for what was clearly a move to have me perform oral sex on him. At that point, I pulled away quite violently and told him I had to go. I did not see him again before he left. If you find that far-fetched, then this next part might give you reason to dismiss the rest of this story completely. I am a gay man. If you're still with me, I should be clear that I am not making any suggestions contradicting Cory Booker's public stance on his own sexual orientation. In my experience, straight men are fairly non-discriminating in terms of their receptiveness to the prospect of oral sex. And despite the unusual cultural trend towards pathologizing people we don't know, I make no claim to know what Mr. Booker considers himself to be privately in terms of sexual labels. But if I were to hazard a guess as to his motivation, I would say that he saw an opportune moment to exploit what he thought to be a devoted sycophant. But that turned out to be a serious miscalculation. Now I realize that I have been pretty vague on the details. And there's a reason for that. I've struggled with a history of abuse in my life going as far back as childhood, but I've been able to manage the enduring trauma for the most part. Just 3 years prior to my encounter with Mr. Booker, I was subjected to sexual harassment from an employer. Subsequent to disclosing the incident, I was swiftly fired despite providing definitive proof and involving a third-party investigation. But I got over that incident. And I learned the unfortunate cynical lesson that coming forward with the truth can oftentimes be more punishing than rewarding. But with Booker it wasn't just harassing words. It was physical. And he wasn't some supervisor who held sway over my job. He was and is a highly influential, political power player. He could have and still could destroy my life if I were to disclose my name and the full facts of my case. So as with my previous experience, I initially let it go. And I feel the need to reiterate that this was someone I looked up to. Do you have any idea how disenchanting an experience like that must feel like? Fast forward 2 jobs, 3 therapists and 1 suicide attempt later to the latter half of last month. Watching Mr. Booker's histrionic defense of alleged sexual assault victims was so laughably ironic, so jarringly cringeworthy and so triggering that it put me into a state of depressed rumination. I wanted so badly to speak out, but I was highly ambivalent about the consequences of going public. So I reached out to 2 lawyers anonymously. One of them got back to me, Harmeet Dhillon of the Dhillon Law Group, a First Amendment trial lawyer and RNC committee member. Once we established privileged communication, I told her my story, disclosing my real name and the details of my case. This included the precise date, location, some corroborating photographic evidence and 2 possible hearsay witnesses that I had told my story to subsequent to the incident. It was, at the very least, much more probative evidence than what was brought forth during the Kavanaugh debacle. Ms. Dhillon responded to me with respectful immediacy, offering candid advice and compassion tempered with pragmatism. And in a refreshingly rare act of bipartisanship, she recommended I contact Ronan Farrow, the father of the modern Me Too movement himself. Theatrical. Brief follow-up to some concerns that have been raised. RAMRANTS. It's worth mentioning the verified Twitter account of lawyer Harmeet K. Dhillon liked tweets related to the accuser. That confirms he likely spoke to her, as he said in the statement he shared. She's not refuting his claims. Neither has Ronan Farrow. The American thinker had more. Senator Spartacus Booker of New Jersey is shaping to be quite a piece of work. After grandstanding through the Senate confirmation hearings about the evils of sexual harassment as he sat there in high-eyed judgment on the blameless Judge Brett Kavanaugh, calling himself Spartacus for his feigned moral courage, he found himself exposed as a hypocrite as word of his 1992 first-person essay about how he sexually harassing a woman made its way back to print, in that internet is forever reality. Not much moral authority over Kavanaugh, pal. Now it's gotten even worse. Some man has come out and said Booker sexually assaulted him, in 2014. The accusation, published on Gateway Pundit's page and given a curt no comment from Booker's lawyer, appears substantial. Apparently, sexual harassment has been a way of life for him, given the long span in years between each fairly strong-looking accusation. And this is one of the Democrats' new generation of leaders, the answer to its Jurassic Park of current leadership. Booker is a grandstander, a posturer, an attention seeker, and now a sexual problem. Bob Menendez, the other New Jersey senator, seems to be getting a run for his money. When are New Jersey's voters going to get rid of these people?